popular TikToker Mr. Prada is in jail and
possibly face the death penalty. Many online have thought that Mr. Prada was crashing out.
I woke up yesterday, I looked at the ceiling, I said,
Abraham's head was covered in a towel, significant blunt force trauma to the head.
The police chasing him with his gun out, move back.
It was a very violent death. He was bludgeoned.
How does a 69-year-old doctor end up with a 20-year-old TikTok celebrity?
Abraham was arrested in 2015. He was accused of inappropriately touching an 11-year-old boy.
That would have made him 11. So Prada was the boy that he groomed on.
Just after 8 a.m. on September 29, 2024, a motorist traveling along Highway 51 between Fluker and Tangipahoa reported seeing a suspicious rolled-up tarp to authorities. Unbeknownst to them, that call was about to unearth a shocking and brutal murder. But not only that, the investigation would dig up a dark past that led to a possible motive pointing to a famous TikTok star being the culprit of the bloody attack.
On this stretch of Highway 51, between the village of Tangipahoa and Fluker, the only sounds are vehicles and a passing train. But on Sunday, it was the center of the Tangipahoa Parish Sheriff's attention. Just after 8 a.m., deputies responded to a call of a body wrapped in a tarp on the side of the highway.
Upon arriving at the scene, deputies cut open the tarp to find the remains of a deceased white adult male inside. According to affidavit records, the following troubling discoveries were made upon inspection of the battered corpse.
Sunday, 8:25 a.m., Tangipahoa Parish deputies found the body of Dr. Nick wrapped in a comforter, bound with duct tape, and inside of a tarp, dumped along the side of US 51 in Fluker. The warrant states Abraham's head was covered in a towel, and it lists significant blunt force trauma to the head.
The severity of the homicide was then truly known when the person inside the tarp was identified as prominent therapist, motivational speaker, musician, and former famed priest, 69-year-old William Nicholas Abraham. The state Abraham's body was found in bore signs of a personal vendetta because, according to Tangipahoa Sheriff Gerald Sticker, his body was found in a horrific condition, with bruises covering his head, shoulders, and neck. The only way he could describe the grotesque scene he saw was to accredit it to the beating of a very violent and physical attack.
A lot of physical damage done to the victim. There was a lot of physical trauma, and so this individual was bludgeoned as a very violent crime.
An autopsy of the body corroborated the nasty injuries observed, listing the cause of death as blunt force trauma to the upper body area. The location where his body was dumped was about 60 miles northeast of Baton Rouge, where detectives said Abraham worked at his office in this building. Investigating the crime scene, it was determined Abraham was murdered elsewhere the night prior and dumped in the rural area to minimize his body being found.
That scene was obviously cordoned off, and it was processed as a homicide. We started from there and worked our way out. It was fairly obvious to us that the homicide didn't occur here. It's a very rural area, kind of desolate, and it was a dump site. It was sometime over last night that it was discarded at that location.
Friends and family of Abraham were in disbelief at his brutal murder. They couldn't fathom someone wanting to hurt the person who was so loved and pushed positivity.
The family of 69-year-old William Nicholas Abraham is in shock.
No one should take a life but God. No one. He's the only one that can take a life. And for someone to take someone else's life, you're a coward.
According to his brothers, he was a Catholic priest for 14 years before becoming a therapist. Now the family is left with memories and questions.
Why, when, how? No, we're all blinded by it.
The savageness, the brutality, the inhumanity of whoever did this to him is just wretched, because you think about their last minutes, right? Terrified, fearful.
Whoever beat Abraham to death was still out there and could be plotting to continue the carnage to another victim. It was pivotal to locate and apprehend them without delay. Two things were a priority to that end: to trace where and when Abraham was murdered, and to track down his missing vehicle, which could lead to the suspect or suspects. The first place detectives searched was at the last known residence of Abraham in Baton Rouge, but there was no indication that a crime occurred at that location. However, a series of events were about to break the case wide open, with disturbing details that made some persons even question if the murder was justice given what was uncovered.
Our death scene, we have no crime of origin, the scene of the homicide. So first place that we start is his last known resident that was on his driver's license. And so we notified the law enforcement agency of that jurisdiction, went to his last known residence and followed up there. And there was no any indication of a crime that would have occurred there.
Detectives learned that on the afternoon of September 29th, the victim's vehicle, identified as a 2018 black Lincoln MKZ bearing Louisiana license plate 320FCD, was captured on law enforcement technology at a shopping center in the 9900 block of Crossing Way in Denham Springs, Louisiana.
Just hours later, a license plate reader picked up Abraham's car exiting I-12 in Livingston at Jubin Crossing. And this message went out to law enforcement statewide.
It's registered to a homicide victim that was located in northern Tangipahoa Parish on September 29th.
According to an arrest warrant on September 30th around noon one day, after Abraham's body was found, a license plate recognition camera captured the vehicle. The warrant states that a Baton Rouge uniform patrol officer received notifications from a license plate reader that the stolen vehicle was in the area on North Sherwood Forest Boulevard. The officer stated that he observed the stolen vehicle traveling southbound in the 4300 block of North Sherwood Forest Boulevard, and he initiated a traffic stop by activating the lights and sirens on his marked Baton Rouge Police Department vehicle. The car's driver first complied and pulled into a nearby parking lot. Once the car stopped, the officer exited his vehicle and gave the driver commands to exit his car. That's when things began going left, because the driver did not comply with the command. Realizing something was off about the situation, the officer reported that he went to the rear of his vehicle to prepare for a tactical approach. At the same time, the driver was also realizing the same and felt desperate enough to make his next move. While the officer was at the rear, the driver of the stolen car intentionally backed into the marked vehicle parked behind, damaging the front. The driver would then put the car in drive and speed off between the pathway of two buildings at this depicted business area.
Monday afternoon, Baton Rouge police say they spotted him driving the victim's stolen car along Sherwood Forest Boulevard. Witnesses tell us police had him stopped in this parking lot. He tried to back up, and when he realized he couldn't get out, he hopped up onto this curb and went through this breezeway. He drove through this way, crashing into this planter right here, and then made his way to the back parking lot. The wheel then fell off the car back here. He got out and ran through those buildings.
The officer entered his vehicle and began searching for the escaped driver, but he only located the car unoccupied with damages on the exterior. A video would soon surface online by a bystander who taped the getaway. It showed the assailant ditching the crashed vehicle and escaping on foot.
The police chasing him with his gun out, move back.
Authorities didn't know it then, but Mr. Prada had already contacted unsuspecting family members for help and was no longer on foot.
Officers chased him before he crashed and ran away.
He called for a ride from a family member, and that family member, not knowing what was going on, picked him up, brought him back to his apartment.
Detectives reviewed surveillance footage from the shopping center and released CCTV images of the suspect. They promptly requested the public's assistance in identifying the assailant. It didn't take long for him to be identified as 20-year-old Terrion Thomas. And that's when the news sent shockwaves across the internet, because Thomas was the famous social media personality with millions of followers, known to his fans as Mr. Prada.
An arrest warrant had been issued for Thomas, known to more than 4 million of his TikTok followers as Mr. Prada. Thomas is wanted for unauthorized use of motor vehicle, aggravated criminal damage to property, and resisting an officer.
This threw a curveball into the case, because now even more speculations and questions arose, because once the internet got a hold that it was a famous influencer in the crosshairs, it didn't take long for dark secrets to begin coming to light. The type of details that led many to speculate Abraham's career as a therapist, working with many in the LGBTQ community, may be the reason he was murdered in such a gruesome manner.
The mysterious murder of 69-year-old William Abraham has a lot of people speculating a motive and looking into the past of the man that was killed. Abraham held his private practice inside this building on Connell Park Lane in Baton Rouge. Some believe Abraham's work as a therapist could have led to his demise.
As it turns out, Abraham is reported to have 2 prior arrests, one in particular revolving around a very serious allegation and charge.
Law enforcement is still working to confirm a motive, but according to Sheriff Sticker, Abraham had 2 prior arrests. In 2015, he was accused of inappropriately touching an 11-year-old boy during a therapy session.
In February of 2015, Abraham was arrested on molestation charges in a case involving an 11-year-old boy to who he was a therapist to at the time. An obtained affidavit states that on February 16, 2015, detectives with the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office were contacted by a woman in reference to her 11-year-old grandson, stating that his therapist, who at the time was Abraham, had touched him on his privates on February 3, 2015 during a session.
A Baton Rouge therapist is under investigation after a woman reported that he allegedly touched her grandson inappropriately. She says it happened back in February. According to police reports, the boy was so upset after the session, he said he never wanted to see the therapist, 60-year-old William Abraham, again. Authorities say the boy allegedly told his new therapist about the accusations. Abraham was arrested and charged with molestation of a juvenile. His bond is set at $25,000.
The obvious question that presented itself was, how could Abraham still be a legal therapist after such charges? Well, the East Baton Rouge District Attorney Hilla Moore's office was contacted with that very question, and the response gave reason as to why the charges were dropped, and Abraham was absolved of all wrongdoing due to lack of evidence to prove the claims of the alleged victim.
I reached out to the East Baton Rouge District Attorney on exactly why the charges were dropped. District Attorney Hilla Moore says his office investigated the incident for 2 years, but did not believe the evidence supported the DA's burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Moore says, quote, after considering all available evidence, the best interests of the child, and lack of any inculpatory statements by the arrestee, we declined to institute formal charges.
The gears in the minds of many across social media began turning, and rumored connections began being made. Some, like a social media personality, Messy Marge, tried deducing if Mr. Prada was the boy in the 2015 case that plotted revenge.
They did the timestamp, and basically Prada was born in 2004. Was born February 28th, 2015. The case happened. Prada was born in 2004. That would have made him 11. That would have made him 10, 11, 12. 1, 2. Wait, 10, 11, 12. That would have made him 11. So Prada was the boy that he groomed on.
That theory made its way to news stations like Fox Houston, where they discussed the case and murder with psychotherapist and certified sex therapist Dr. Angela Jones.
You know, there's a lot of twists and turns in this story, right? The alleged idea that Mr. Prada may have been molested by this therapist. So it's clearly that if that is the case, that Mr. Prada sought him out, sought his services, and actually planned this, right? So this is something that he has, if this is true, if this storyline is true, that this is something that is premeditated, planned, and that he's been wanting to do this for a long time. Now, whether it's not true or is true, we don't know if Mr. Prada is related to the person that was molested, or if he was molested and he just wants to, you know, find a way to get the people who have done this to other people. So there's
or it could
that
be
twist.
something totally different.
Right.
And his attorney has denied this, but that's what an attorney would do.
Correct.
If he is defending his client.
Correct. Right. But I mean, we already see that he was actually arrested for molesting an 11-year-old in 2015. So it's not that case in particular. It tells you, like, this is something that actually can happen with this person because he was already arrested. Obviously, he was found guilty. So it's not that far off.
Right.
Some say that if that was the alleged motive, no one should take a life, while another side argues that a revenge homicide in such a situation would be justice.
Many people would think, okay, if he was a victim, then it's justified. It's not justified.
Correct.
Especially if you planned it out.
Right. It's not justified. Murder is murder. Everything I'm saying is alleged. We don't know if that is the actual fact.
Exactly.
And so at the end of the day, you know, if he did victimize the person that did murder him, you know, I'm never going to say, yeah, he deserved to die. I'm not really someone who's going to say that. But I know there's a lot of people out there who do feel that way.
This brings into question a troubling post Mr. Prada reposted to his TikTok account that eerily draws reference to revenge. The video was titled, "Real Girls Protect Each Other from Creeps," and this was the disturbing scene it depicted. That video was but one of many that was thrust into the spotlight. Months prior, he posted a video practicing for his mugshot with the caption reading,
"Practicing his mugshot because this might be the year someone meets God if they piss me off too much."
Was Mr. Prada already considering the act of murder to which he's now the suspect? Or was it a spontaneous outburst? Or was it a mental break? Fans of the famed influencer had recently become worried about his mental health as he appeared in a video with his hair badly shaved off. Something was off. His demeanor and mannerisms appeared to be on a downward spiral. Mr. Prada was also open with his mental health problems, so there were various angles that could have led to the alleged crime.
And some people even commenting on his behavior and mental health. Let's take a look at some of those clips.
Don't do anything drastic unless you want to look like this. Life is a prison. Get me the out. Like, I just woke up yesterday. I woke up yesterday. I looked at the ceiling. I said, ah!
In one of his TikTok videos, he talked about dealing with mental issues.
I'm bipolar. Yeah. Y'all never seen anybody that's bipolar before?
A warrant was posted for his arrest. It didn't take long for authorities to be tipped off as to his whereabouts by his own family, who saw him as a suspect and alerted authorities. He was tracked to Texas and swiftly apprehended.
The same family members who brought Thomas back to his apartment after the police chase saw these pictures on the news and later told investigators,
hey, he got a ride back to his apartment after the pursuit with BRPD, and somehow he got to the bus station. And from the bus station, he took the bus to Dallas, Texas.
The U.S. Marshal Service arrested him in Dallas late Tuesday.
Thomas was arrested in Dallas last week and flown back to Baton Rouge this afternoon. Cardero Cloy was on that flight.
We boarded the plane, and then later on, some people were in the back of the plane, and they made them move to other seats to bring the inmate on. And they sat at the back of the plane.
With his arrest came details that began piecing together a timeline of Abraham's movements that hinted at something going on between Abraham and Mr. Prada. It began with a message to his social media on Friday, September 27th, looking for tickets to the Saints game. The following day, on Saturday, September 28th, his roommate informed authorities Abraham said he was heading out to clean his car and then go to the office to do paperwork. But he never returned.
Abraham's roommate says he left home on Saturday, saying he was going to get his car cleaned and would stop by his office to do paperwork. He told his roommate it would take a couple of hours, but he never came home.
Surveillance footage and evidence at Mr. Prada's apartment would later answer why, and the reason was a bloody and malicious one. The arrest warrant states that surveillance footage captured Abraham going to Mr. Prada's apartment that Saturday around 11 a.m. with the same clothing he was found in when murdered, but was never seen leaving the apartment. Instead, neighbors reported witnessing Mr. Prada struggling to drag a blue-colored tarp down the stairs hours later, before loading the tarp into the victim's vehicle. It's believed inside that tarp was the deceased Abraham.
They say surveillance video shows the victim, Dr. Nick Abraham, arrive here at Mr. Prada's apartment Saturday morning, but he never walked back out.
We do have a witness that saw him by himself, struggling to pull what we now believe was the body of our victim.
When detectives searched his Baton Rouge apartment, they say they found evidence that a violent physical altercation happened there, including several sharp objects and weapons, plus a large amount of blood.
During the execution of a residential search warrant at the apartment, homicide detectives discovered evidence that indicated a violent physical altercation ensued inside. Blood splatter stained throughout the apartment, along with multiple sharp objects and other weapons, which they reported may have been used to stab Abraham.
Detectives say Dr. Abraham was stabbed inside Thomas's apartment.
Additional evidence indicated an apparent effort to discard evidence by cleaning the scene, but he didn't clean it well enough because crime scene investigators collected DNA contact swabs of the blood at the scene, which were submitted to the Louisiana State Police Crime Lab for analysis. The tests came back positive for the victim's blood.
Inside the apartment, detectives collected blood samples and other evidence.
That's where they found what they believe was signs of struggle and of possible homicide.
The State Police Crime Lab expedited testing of that evidence before returning their report to the sheriff's office.
We got a DNA match for our victim last night, and that's why Terrion Thomas was charged with that murder last night.
With so much evidence stacked against Mr. Prada, his charges were upgraded to second-degree murder before being upgraded to the most serious crime, first-degree murder, which can now place the death penalty on the table due to the victim being over 65 years old.
New charges and a new mugshot for Terrion Thomas. The TikTok celebrity now facing capital murder charges in the death of 69-year-old Dr. Nicholas Abraham.
65 and above, someone that's killed is eligible for the death penalty for first-degree murder.
Louisiana law states a first-degree murder charge applies to any victim under 12 or over 65.
It became evident there was more to the two than meets the eye. It raised questions about the relationship between them. What was Abraham doing at that apartment if authorities state he was not Mr. Prada's therapist?
Was there a relationship between these two, or are people speculating that?
I mean, a lot of people are speculating that. We do know that both men in this situation were openly gay. Mm-hmm. So, you know, obviously on the internet, people run with narratives off rip, but I mean, it's a possibility.
Both were open about their sexuality, but one of Abraham's close friends speculated he was set up and murdered because of it.
Investigative reporter John Rapolo spoke with a friend of Abraham who says his sexuality may have played a role in his death.
Ambo said Abraham was openly gay. He said initially he thought that could have had something to do with his death.
It felt like a hate crime, right? It felt like maybe Dr. Nick was, involving himself in some fun or some interests of, some kind of intimate interest with somebody in a thing, and maybe somebody set him up to hurt him.
The pieces are slowly coming together as the investigation unveils the truth. Mr. Prada went from TikTok fame to criminal popularity in the space of just 48 hours. Ironic, 48 hours could cost him a lifetime of freedom. For more true crime documentaries, check out one of the videos on the screen. This has been an episode of Mysteries, where true stories from around the world come to life. What stories come next? Like, share, comment, and subscribe to never miss what intriguing chronicles will be told.